Oh, just farming some extra lives, right? Hopefully I don't crash the ring economy. Hey y'all, I'm back with another big video. Today's project is a custom-built Sonic the Hedgehog themed BabyBelt Pro. Before I jump into the meat of this video, I want to do some background as I feel it's very important. For anyone who has never heard of a BabyBelt printer before, it is a DIY belt-styled printer. A belt printer works a little differently compared to a traditional 3D printer. On a standard printer, a tool head prints on a flat surface and rises up slowly in just one direction. In this sense, a 3D printer is actually more like a 2D printer that also moves in an additional direction. For a belt printer, this is mainly true, but just tilt the printer at an angle and move the bed like a conveyor belt, hence the name. By moving the bed like this, you are able to achieve an infinite amount of size in one direction. This means you can either make one really long print or an infinite amount of a smaller object, like the rings at the beginning of this video. Now that you're caught up on the printer, here's the background on this project specifically. I've been interested in building my own baby belt since around 2023. Also, I don't think I got a video of it happening, but they had these spiders dropping into these cages down here as they were printing to show off how you can use the baby belt in this configuration to print infinite pieces.
Like one of the best scenarios that Rob could have done, just to be like, look, this is how you can do your production. Like,
yeah. The coolest thing for me, I know this is such a stupid thing to think is cool, the fact that it's printing on a piece of fabric is really cool to me.
That is literally the best. That's my most exciting thing.
Okay, good. I'm not crazy for thinking that.
I've got Ninja Turtles on it, and so like literally, like if you go to Walmart, they've got fabric there that are called fat quarters. It's cool,
yeah,
right?
I know. And honestly, sewing is how I explain 3D printing to people, because a spool of thread is basically a spool of filament. The only difference is that's like it's not sewing it; it's printing it, but it works very much the same.
He's using like an iron-on material that makes the fabric in such a way where it like pushes into the fabric, so it's like got kind of like a release factor when it starts to print on it. But at the end of the day, like, it's like people get into Converses that are customized with different fabrics and stuff. Like back in the 80s and 90s, they had different runs, like themes, Batman themes, and different movie themes and stuff. And so it's just very like, oh hey, I love this character, and oh look, I can get fabric, great.
Yeah. It's this and the Voron stuff has been convincing me that maybe I need to build a printer, because I really dig the customizability of this kind of stuff, really making your printer your own. And since I made that printer that can take the 2.85 millimeter filament, now I have experience with basically building my own printer. So I feel like I might have the experience needed to do something like this, and it's really enticing me. This and the Rook are the two that I'm like really interested in.
Once you build the kit, you'll be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's just like doing a recreator. Once you build, people are like, oh my god, I built the recreator. I really wanted the recreator to be,
But this project officially started at last year's 3D Printopia. Printceps and Recreator share a lot of space, and Rob specifically is a good friend of many of the team members, now myself included. I pitched the idea to him of a custom build, and he really liked the idea. After my Mario K1 project was a huge success, I wanted to keep the ball rolling and make another heavily themed build. Originally, I had planned to make this project centered around Hatsune Miku and make the belt in the style of the one from the Miku music video. This would end up being the big video for May. I wasn't really in love with that idea, so I just kept going back to the drawing board, but nothing ever really stuck. Around that time, I was in one of Dreams Void's streams, where he was building his own baby belt. While we were chatting, He asked if I was ever going to finish my Sonic TV monitor project, something from a long time ago on this channel, and that's when it hit me. The BabyBelt was the perfect candidate for a Sonic-themed build. With the parts and the idea in hand, I got to work. For this build, I modified and customized several parts of the BabyBelt build, but all of my changes are purely aesthetic. This work does not change any of the function of the printer itself. As such, this work should apply to anyone using a self-source kit, like myself, or the kit from West 3D. I think the best place to start with customization is with the frame and the bed. The frame is styled to look like the ground in Green Hill Zone. The bed, being this grass-looking fabric, helps complete that look. I had originally looked to find a striped green and dark green fabric to better emulate the look of Green Hill's striped grass, but I never found one that just looked right. For the two roller axles, I was originally going to make them in a mixture of PETG and TPU air. This is actually a method first pitched by a user in the BabyBelt Discord, and I wanted to try it out since I had both the filament needed and a tool changer printer to print it out. I eventually ditched this idea as I didn't really have the time needed to fully calibrate the TPU Air for my new Snapmaker U1. Additionally, I struggled to print the axle in one material, let alone in a complex multi-material fashion. The goal of multi-material in this case is to leverage the greater surface friction of the TPU Air to get a better grip on the fabric bed. This is usually done with electrical tape, and eventually that's what I settled with after this one failed. If I come back to this project in the future, I can always reprint the axle in this multi-material fashion, and at the very least, it was a very good proof of concept. It just didn't end up being really that stable on the bed, and so I had to ditch it. If you can, I recommend splitting the axle in two and supergluing it afterwards for the best chance of a successful print. Moving from the bed to the frame, I think I nailed the colors and the look completely, and I really have no changes or corrections whatsoever. The way I accomplished this was by dropping the frame's STL in my slicer and copying down the total size. I then went into Onshape and made a grid of squares, extruding each square 0.4 millimeters. This being 2 layers thick. I exported this grid of squares and added it back to the model as a modifier and made each of the squares a darker brown, leaving the frame as the lighter brown. Speaking of which, the two colors I used for the frame were Overture Brown PLA and Duramic Brown PLA. To complete the frame, there's the front scraper. I had originally planned to add a little bit of silk blue filament to emulate a waterfall, but I really don't like how it looked in the slicer, so I didn't want to try it on a full build and waste all the filament. And it also really wouldn't make sense given the build because the grass would then be somehow going into water. Moving to the front of the printer, the screen is the next part that I modified. The front screen of the BabyBelt is designed to look like a TV power-up monitor from the Genesis Sonic games. The way I achieved this look was by printing the stock frame piece and taking measurements after the fact. With those measurements in hand, I went back to Onshape. I made a black outline piece and sectioned a portion of it for a hinge. Originally, this piece was much thinner and was going to use a piece of filament for an active hinge. This is actually similar to the screen protector that I printed and used on my Bamboo A1, if you remember that from that video. The design was really flimsy and didn't allow for swappable faceplates, which meant that I was always stuck with the same design. That's when I got the idea to use magnets, like with my Mario K1 Peach's Castle riser. Redesigning to allow for magnets allowed for customizable and swappable faceplates. I made 4 variations: a ring, speed shoe, power shield, and invincibility monitor cover. I like how these turned out, and while it's hard to pick a favorite, I think the shield might be the sharpest. I made all these using Inland Basics Black PLA, Overture White PLA, Inland Yellow PLA Plus, Prusament Royal Blue PLA, and Snapmaker Red PLA. As for the choice of power-ups, I went with these as the entire build was focused on Sonic 1, that Sonic 1 for the Genesis, and other variations were only seen in future titles. Oh, and I know you're thinking, but wait, what about the extra life monitor? That was in Sonic 1. Well, I didn't make this variation as with the next modification, I was worried the build would have too much Sonic, if that's even possible. Speaking of which, the next modification is aesthetically the most apparent when looking at the whole build. That's this giant Sonic cutout. This is paired with the red belt gear. The way I made this was by scaling up a model made by this user on MakerWorld. The hole in the center, when scaled up, is actually the perfect size to accommodate the belt axle, and after I installed it, it was glued onto the frame. This allows the gear to rotate fully and never catch on the actual Sonic, and it makes it look like Sonic is running on the belt as it prints. This was actually the idea that sparked this build to begin with, and I just gotta say, it turned out so cute. The Sonic was printed in Overture White PLA, 3D Hojor Beige PLA, Prusament Royal Blue PLA, and Inland Basics Black PLA. But hey, what is Sonic without his famous nemesis? So, Eggman has always been one of my favorite video game villains. I really like how he's always fighting you directly in each zone of each game. I wanted to represent that on this printer by including the man himself. This Eggman was created by drawing up a sketch that looked like his model in the first Eggmobile seen at the end of Green Hill Zone. So I know this is a little sketchy, but here's a mock-up I made before the model was finalized when I was discussing this idea with Dreams Void. As you can see, the black and yellow striped pattern is a reference to the arrow on the front of the Eggmobile, and the yellow knob on the top is meant to look like the light on the front of the sprite. It could also be the flame at the back of the sprite too. Originally, I had plans to make a small tan and brown circle in the same style as the frame itself, and glue it onto the part cooling fan. This would end up being similar to the Luma on my Mario K1. But it just felt like too much brown and tan on the build, and you really barely see this detail from normal viewing angles, so it kind of just would have been extra work for no real gain. As for the coloration of the main body of the carriage itself, I went with this slightly darker gray for two reasons. Firstly, I wanted the carriage to stand out from the front screen as they are directly next to each other. I didn't want the build to look like a big gray blob from afar, because Sonic is really colorful. The second reason is admittedly kind of funny. I just simply ran out of light gray when printing the screen, and so I had to pivot. Despite this, I think this portion of the build turned out just as cute as the rest of the printer. So when I was making the concepts for this whole printer, the idea behind having Eggman on top of the print head was that he would be like driving the printer as it printed. And then the printer itself would be like he was manufacturing the badniks that would then move towards Sonic. I realize it's kind of complex in the concept and such a small detail to really focus on, but it really showed up on the final build, and I'm so happy that I did it. Okay, so that wraps up the section on the customized portions of the build. Now I just kind of want to tackle the actual building of this printer and my advice to anyone who wants to try to replicate my project. I won't discuss too much of the physical build as I streamed my entire build live on YouTube. This section will mainly touch on the technical aspects of the calibration and other stuff along with finishing the build. My biggest warning is about the difficulty of this project. I would heavily recommend going the route of the ready-made kit from West 3D unless you are very knowledgeable in the field. I would only recommend the build-it-yourself project to those who are very experienced with this kind of build. I would say something like a Voron would be comparable at the very least. Additionally, while I was able to get some smaller prints for the video, they are far from perfect. As to not bog this video down, I'm gonna kind of skim a little bit on the final calibration and honing in of this printer, as it has to do less with the customizations aspects of this build and more of the actual final BabyBelt Pro. If there is sufficient interest, I'll make a follow-up video to this video where I go much more in depth into some of the final filament and software calibrations of the BabyBelt. I built this unit running Marlin Legacy firmware, but I plan to eventually move it to running Clipper off of a dedicated Raspberry Pi. While I did not have the time to do that for this video, this would allow me to add much more to the build than I already did. Something like a smart filament runout sensor comes to mind. Belt printers in general are a very novel piece in the hobby space, to the point where currently, as of the publishing of this video, the newest nightly build of OrcaSlicer is the only way to have a official Printceps profile on OrcaSlicer. I'll be actively honing in my slicing and modeling and understanding of this printer, as I have a couple upcoming projects that really need that super long Z-axis that I mentioned earlier. In conclusion, I am extremely happy with how this project turned out. Like I said in my Mario K1 video, the idea of modifying and customizing a printer outside of just special colors for the rails is something I really wish we saw more of in the community. I am so happy to continue this work, and now that it has been successful, I already have a bunch of new ideas for heavily customized builds in the future. I want to give a huge shout out to Rob for helping me source some of the parts for this build, and a massive, huge shout out to Dreams Void for helping me troubleshoot along the way. This video would not have been possible without you, man. Thank you so much. If you're watching this video and want to see more DIY printer shenanigans, or just like kind of more of this technical dive on 3D printing, please check him out. Currently, he's finishing a custom Prusa Mini build made out of a special 3D printed building block called Print-A-Block. Actually, I'm not sure when this video will be published, so he could be done with it by that time, so I apologize, Dreams, if you've already finished it. Oh, and like I said earlier, he's the one who made his own BabyBelt as well. Links are in the description and hopefully up in the iCard up in the right. Well, that about wraps up all I have to say for this video. I hope you enjoyed and maybe got some inspiration to tackle your own themed builds in the future. If you actually have done a custom build, please reach out to me on my socials and let me know what you did. I'd love to see this kind of stuff. Additionally, if you have any ideas for a custom printer build and feel like sharing, leave a comment. Now, thank you all very much for watching, and bye-bye!